Right, so here's our map of low super open areas of Middlesbrough, colour coded on the basis of multiple deprivation score information. So we're going to have a look at this here and figure out how we can use it to get actual quantitative information which can help us answer a number of questions. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit just to make a point about the colour coding first. Right, so I need to find an area which is relevant. Yeah, so this area here appears to be contiguous. That's because it's got the same index of deprivation score. So there's one low super output area over here. If anyone can figure out how to hide this pop-up, please let me know. I used to be able to do it quite easily. It doesn't seem to work now. Anyway, so there's one low super output area there, another one over here, and another one over here. So that's something you need to bear in mind. We'll notice when we pop these up, we get this information each here, which is the main identifier, which is sort of what we're interested in terms of identifying the super output area. Right, so I'm just going to scroll up towards Albert Park area to make a couple of points. Now, again, if we click on the area here, we see it's quite a big area. It covers the whole of the park and the area to the south of it. Now, of course, people don't, we hope, live in the park. So when we're thinking about populations, we need to take that into consideration. Most of the population is weighted to the bottom area down here. So this is done using a calculation called population centroid, which is just a weighted measure based on the average of where people lives, and it brings up a geographical location which is the population centre of a particular low super output area. So I can click on this one and we can see that the population centroid is well to the south. It's quite a way south of Albert Park. If you look at other areas, you see it's much more in the centre because they are, much more residential areas, and there's a general distribution where people live. Okay, that's potentially quite useful because it gives us something which we can measure things from. And one of the things we want to measure, for example, might be where takeaway shops are. So I can bring on the takeaway shops, and we see there's a group of them associated around here on Linthorpe Road, for example, obviously. One on Cumberland Road, and a couple a bit distant here on York Road and various other places. Now, what we might want to know is the geographical distance from the population centroid to, say, the 10 nearest or the 5 nearest of these, of the actual takeaways. I mentioned takeaways there, obviously, but we can also bring in things like supermarkets, and non-supermarket retailers. So these are the sort of things we'd be interested in if we're talking about population swamps, beg your pardon. So if we're talking about food deserts or food swamps, which is what we normally talk about these days. So we'll bring back up the takeaways. Zoom in a little bit just so we can see what's going on. Now, there are a number of measurement tools which you can use. You're going to be a bit sort of quick and you've got to take a record of what you're measuring here. But for example, what we can do is we can go into measure, and there's a number of things here which we're not that interested in. The one thing we're interested in is distance. We may be interested in, obviously, area for other things if we're measuring areas of, say, allotments in the town. That's the sort of thing we could do. But here we're just interested in distance. So I've clicked on the distance and it's in kilometres. So right, I click down here, and I click here, and it tells us the distance to the first selected takeaway is 0.13 kilometres. Okay, so I'll close that up, and it will disappear, unfortunately. So I've started putting them into an Excel spreadsheet, and I'll do the other 5, then we'll have a look at them. So I'll pause the video while I'm doing them, and we'll come back and we'll get the results. So that was the first one we did. I'll probably do the second one. Again, go to measurements. Click and click 0.27. Now we notice I didn't exactly completely start at the exact point there, so you may want to repeat measures as you would normally do in any sort of laboratory-based experiment. So the next one is 0.27 kilometres anyway, and then I'll do these other 3 down here. Okay, so I've measured all of them. And when we work it out, it comes an average of about 0.23. Notice in the answer, I haven't given any more significant figures than was in the results, and you should always do that. When you do the calculation, it'll come out as 2, 3, and several other figures. You should only just quote it to the maximum number of significant figures. Okay, so we could do other things with this. We could, for example, stick in a quick box and whisker plot. So insert charts, all charts, box and whisker plot, which doesn't mean that much by itself, but when we sort of bring in information from other parts of the area, we can maybe get some useful data from this. So I'm going to delete that for a second, and I'm just going to have a quick look for somewhere else we might want to have a look at. So I've moved down to Martin. This particular superoperated area is one we'll have a look at. I'm just going to copy that so it's going to go into my little spreadsheet. Now I'll notice immediately there aren't any takeaways very near. There's a couple some distance away, so it's probably going to take me a little time to find out where there's 5 suitable takeaways. So again, I'll pause the video for a second and I'll be back soon. But obviously, if we just do a quick measurement of one, oops, move the wrong way, measure, so just going down to, oops, it's going down to here. We can see it's 0.8 of a kilometre away. Okay, so is this significant? Does this relate to things like index and multiple deprivation scores? It might be a question we want to ask. So I do quite a lot of wandering around here. There's 1 or 2 takeaways that are quite close. Then you're heading off towards Coolby Newham or up towards back of the sports village. When we look at the data, I'll bring the data in. And we see it's quite striking. The average distance is 5 times as much, and it becomes very clear when you look at the box and whisker plots. So that's the sort of information we can get, which we can then use to look at things like correlations, which again we'll probably talk about a little bit later on. Okay, so there we are, using measuring and population centroids and the information we've got about the location of, in this case, takeaways, to get some quantitative data out of these maps.